as ironic as it may seem, it was while living in Wauchula, Florida, the county seat of Hardee County, population 3,253, cucumber capital of the world. This is where I first got into hip hop. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 1983, I became a fan of Run DMC, Houdini, Egyptian Lover, and especially the soundtracks to Beat Street and Breakin'. And believe it or not, I got to be a pretty decent breakdancer as well. I'd go to school dances just to show off. I wouldn't dance otherwise. Goodness, no. Mostly because I was scared silly about the thought of asking a girl to dance. But if Jam On It by Nucleus came up, or Roxanne, Roxanne by UTFO, I'd be the first one out there. No way could I do any of those moves anymore, though. Not without a personal trainer and maybe a truss. But as I refocused my creative energy into learning guitar, I started seeking out more and more music that I could use to learn my instrument, which meant my interest in rap waned to the point where it was pretty much gone entirely by the time I graduated and headed to college. Looking back, I must have been at least a little aware of trends happening in the genre. There's plenty from the 90s, aughts, and teens that I recognize, for sure, but I lost the thread. I lost the context. It wasn't music I sought out. And meanwhile, in recent years, when I do come in contact with a rap tune, what I've discovered is that I have built for myself a major hurdle to actually hearing the music, namely my ear training. At this point, I spent close to 40 years learning to hear and analyze music in specific ways. When I hear music that I've never heard before, I have trained myself to hear it in ways that let me know how it's put together so that I can play it and understand it. I'm listening to melodic and harmonic structures, the timbres and the textures of the instruments, time signatures and form. What is the soloist doing? How is the bass line interacting with the chords? As for lyrics, well, after many, many repeated listenings, after I feel I have all the information I need to understand the instrumental aspects, I might then make the conscious decision to pay attention to the lyrics, depending on the artist. Not always, though. And as you can imagine, these instincts fail me completely when I listen to rap. There's just not much there musically for me to oddly hook my weirdly trained brain onto. Okay, let me give you an example. If you were to hear my inner thoughts the first time I heard Kanye's Gold Digger, you might have heard something like this. Oh, that's a Ray Charles sample. Huh. There's pretty much no dynamics in the beat at all. And just those two sound sources, just the clap and the kick. So is it really just that 1-2 bar groove and those two samples for the whole song? Yeah, I guess it is. This is boring. It wouldn't have occurred to me to reserve judgment until I also had the lyrics in mind, to hear what Kanye is actually saying. But then Astrid introduced me to the music of Childish Gambino and Kendrick Lamar, and I was impressed, beyond impressed. This was innovative and engaging, emotional and dynamic. And after getting into Kamasi Washington and discovering Thundercat's work with Flying Lotus, I realized there's a lot that has happened in hip-hop and rap since I paid any serious attention to it. And it's time to fix that for sure. But where to start? Every source I looked up cited Illmatic by Nas as one of the best albums of the 90s in any genre. So it's time for me to get plugged back in a bit. The routine I have established as I go through these albums goes something like this. Every day I will spin the album 2 or 3 times in its entirety as I go about my daily tasks. This can mean that my attention is sometimes divided, but the repeated listening helps me to get the overall feel of the album over repeated listens. But I don't leave it at that. I also make sure to listen to the album at least once on studio headphones, at least once on studio monitors, and at least once while reading the lyrics and consulting the credits. This often leads me to further research about the album, reading articles, the Wikipedia entry, the discography of the musicians, etc. What I found while listening to Illmatic is that I had learned the instrumental shape of the album after the first couple of listens. So I ended up listening to the entire album while reading the lyrics at least twice a day, spending a lot more time with the music than I usually do. It turns out this is totally the way for me to listen to this kind of music. By forcing myself to pay attention to the words, I found myself entirely immersed in this album. I mean, yes, the language is specific to place, to time, and to culture. But that doesn't hinder the fact that the poetry is evocative and eminently skillful. Check out this example from The World Is Yours. Wipe the sweat off my dome, spit the phlegm on the streets, suede Timbs on my feet make my cipher complete, whether cruising in a Sikh's cab or Montero Jeep. In just those 3 lines, there is an acknowledgement of the messiness of basic existence that rivals Bukowski for its terseness and dismissiveness. There's a fact that he refers to his look as a cipher. With the choice of that one word, Nas has shown a real depth of self-knowledge regarding his motivations, which is simultaneously profound and also at odds with the actuality of life that he had just stated in the previous line. And then there's the juxtaposition of this living but encoded self against the world outside. And the metaphor for that was the Sikh's cab. And you can find the use of language like this everywhere. Honestly, it's sometimes like reading a Cormac McCarthy novel, but still completely musical. Even reading those lines off the page, you know where each syllable falls against a 4/4 beat. All right, let me go through all of this a few more times and come to some conclusions. When I started listening to Kendrick Lamar, especially the To Pimp a Butterfly album, I came to a realization. Something that I realized that most of you watching this have probably figured out a long time ago, but it was a revelation to me. And it's changed the way that I listen to music with rap. I think most people are used to thinking of a vocalist as contributing lyrics and melody, but that's not what a rapper does. Sure, a rapper's adding the lyrics, but the rapper's voice is a rhythmic instrument, not a melodic one. Strictly speaking, ignoring the lyrics, you can absolutely analyze a rap line the way you would a timbale or a conga line. I've actually done this. Using a 2 or 3 line staff for the 2 or 3 vocal tones used in a song, you can chart out a tune like New York State of Mind so that it can be played on pitched drums. And this got me to thinking, what if you charted out a full song this way and then used those rhythms and those accents to serve as a template for improvisation? That is, build a solo using your own notes, but using the rhythms and the accents pulled from a chart made from a rhythmic analysis of lines from a rap. Well, I actually tried to do this for the music I recorded for this video, and you know what I discovered? In a larger piece, it totally works. In a 1-minute piece, it totally doesn't. It was busy and noisy and hard to focus on. You need to establish the context first before you can expand on it. But for something like my Miles-inspired thing, you can't lead with it. Which, now that I think of it, is entirely what Miles Davis did with his trumpet line on Bitches Brew in the first place. I guess there's a reason why that doesn't start off on bar 1. I'm also reminded a bit of what Frank Zappa said about some of his songs like I'm the Slime or Cosmic Debris. The reason he spoke the lyrics instead of singing them is because he correctly concluded that singing unfamiliar words like vile and pernicious, well, it hides them, it obfuscates them. In order to hear what he's saying, he had to speak them. And interestingly enough, if you listen to Zappa's output, when he has a song with spoken lyrics, the accompaniment behind him is almost always a single chord, a sparse but driving groove, and limited instrumentation. So again, the rest of y'all figured this out ages ago, but it turns out creating a beat to serve as the groove for a hip-hop song is not a trivial thing. They sound that way for a reason. Bringing it back to Illmatic specifically. If you think about it, as a kid, I spent a lot of time with the beginnings of hip-hop, and then not much at all for decades until recently. In the rock world, that would be roughly analogous to me growing up listening to Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley, then not listening to rock at all again until like the Joshua Tree or Master of Puppets. By going back to 1994 and picking up Illmatic, what I'm hoping to do is land on the hip hop equivalent of the Beatles or the Stones, a jumping off point where I can maybe fill in the time I lost. I think I will be revisiting this album, but only when I can give it my full attention. I don't yet have the ear to listen to hip hop casually. But once I can focus on what I'm hearing, it's brilliant. So, end of the story, I guess I got more work to do.